Okay, so in this article, it talks about sibling rivalry, but more specifically in adolescence, which they define as children that are over the age of 12. They consider pre-adolescents 10 to 13 as well. Um, they want to talk about the conflict with other people in their cognitive, social, and individual development that's affected by it. Um, they say that this is most common, like the rivalry and the features of sibling relationships is most common, like during childhood and adolescent timing, which is why they thought it was more appropriate to interview those age groups that they define as. Um, and they talk about the study has two goals. The first one is to see the frequency in which conflicts occur, um, and the relationship between um, the sibling relationship and the family structure. So they want to see if there are siblings that fight more, if the families are divorced, married, depending on it, like to see if there's a correlation between the two, and to see if there is a relationship between the frequency of fights and how strong the fights are, and to see if that connects with anything else. So the method in which the information is recorded is that they interviewed different people, 51 girls and 53 boys. It was like they took part in a bigger study. The only problem with this is that the people came from the people came from a working urban class area, so it's not allowed to for a variety of people, but they came from two Midwestern communities, mostly one of them middle class and one on the edge of like the large metropolitan area. Most people came from like Europe as their background. Um, they interviewed the people's grade level and gender, and the grade level was mostly third graders and fifth graders. It was mostly, no, the grade level was mostly consistent of a different grade level, but um, they did interview and they tried to figure out the perceptions of sibling relationships. They had four variables: emotional closeness, shared time, importance of sibling, and relationship satisfaction. So they had numeric answers and then they had them write in answers that were longer. And for the results, the frequency of fights they found was unrelated to the response or target. Like it wasn't related to the gender or age of the sibling, which they thought it would have a connection, but it didn't. The connection between the frequency of fights and the home status, like if the parents are together or not, um, there was no significance. They found that there were some numbers that connected between the two, but that there was no overall grand connection that distinguished that the amount of fights siblings have correlates to whether the parents are together or not. Um, and they found that people that have two siblings have a lot more fights than people who have three or more siblings, because with the more siblings that they had, they ended up working better together because the sureness of the association with the parents was grander. They found that there was a pretty grand distribution of family resources in which that um most of the fights were based on like material things. They also found that in social context wise, the majority of fights were in the presence of family members, so they thought that it wouldn't be, but most people would see the fights that were happening, and the fights were described in the sense that they didn't interrupt like an activity that was going on. So if they're in the middle of something, it usually did not get interrupted. Like the activity didn't get interrupted by the fights. And that the major the majority of people said that the fights would last between 6 minutes and an hour, and then the second majority amount of people um said that the fights lasted within 5 minutes and then they were over. They didn't really talk that long, but they also found that girls would keep on to their fights and would have more reoccurring fights of the same thing, of the same topic, and that would happen most of the time.